Content warning. Horror, death, and violence. This video contains spoilers for the Twilight Zone text adventure. Adaptations can be hard, especially when the medium you're adapting to is limited in what it can transfer over from the source material. Even in those cases, there usually can be something incorporated from the original to create something new while still feeling faithful to the original. And with the Twilight Zone text adventure, it somewhat attempts at this, but fails in almost every respect. Now, it's not a horrible game. In fact, there is something I highly enjoyed in it, but it ignores most of what the Twilight Zone is about, instead using small bits and pieces from it and taking them in other directions. Developed by First Row Software Publishing and released on DOS and Amiga in 1988, The Twilight Zone is a text adventure based on the Twilight Zone TV series. The Twilight Zone is an anthology TV series with various sci-fi, horror, or thriller stories, usually with a plot twist at the end to deliver a moral or idea to ponder each episode. Now, how does this text adventure take that and make a game out of it? Well, it pretty much only takes 4 things from the show: the anthology aspect, the occasional horror, the theme song, and the plot twist. Outside of these parts, the game has very little connection to the Twilight Zone. The game begins with the player waking up in their house, and sets one completely loose after. One can be informed through their television that the town is under military siege, but is given no direction in what they need to do. When I was playing without a walkthrough, I aimlessly wandered throughout the town until I broke into a toy store and was transported to the Vietnam War. Yeah, I was confused too. But once I used a walkthrough, it became clear what was going on. Somewhat. Essentially, the town the player starts in is a hub of sorts, and from there are places that will transfer you to other scenes. Once in a scene, such as the Vietnam War one, the player has to figure out the tasks they need to accomplish, and once they do so, are transported to the next scene. This is how the anthology aspect of the Twilight Zone is incorporated. The player is placed in a variety of situations, such as having to bury a soldier in the Vietnam War, saving a girl from a burning barn, winning a formula race, surviving a copy of the Most Dangerous Game, and a few more situations. Outside of being completely separate stories, they carry none of the atmosphere or even tone of the show. Most aren't even scary and just are obstacles to accomplish, the only one nearing horror being escaping death on a train. The tone here can mainly be described as irreverent. The game resorts to humor that degrades the player when they make a wrong move, and the situations one is put in are pointless and offer little satisfaction. I mean, at least the graphics of the areas the player is in can be nice to look at, but unfortunately the version with graphics would crash partway through the game for me, so the ending section will only be in text. I'm not going to fault the game, as I'm pretty sure it was more a problem with emulation on modern hardware more than anything. The gameplay itself is your average text adventure puzzles, acquiring and using items in various ways to solve puzzles, but the controls here make it almost impossible to progress without a guide. At first I played without a walkthrough, somehow getting myself out of the house, which is surprisingly no small feat, considering one has to realize that one can't leave their house without either leaving their money behind or explicitly putting it in their wallet or pocket. These specific required actions are a frequent frustration in this text adventure, mainly due to the text parser. By an older review I was able to find on the game, I was led to believe that movement was based on only 4-way direction, but eventually I found out that this is not the case at all. I was typing out my movements completely, such as go north, go south, etc. When I would type actions such as go southwest, go northwest, it would not register, so I thought those directions weren't supported. Little did I know until later in the game, when I was stuck, that those directions are available, but only in shortcut forms such as SW, NW, etc. This is frustrating, but at least once it is known, it's not a problem anymore. What is worse is when the game outright deceives the player on what needs to be typed, even when they know what to do. At the very last puzzle of the game, the player arrives at a door with no handle or lock, but there is an imprint. I know that the locket goes into the imprint. The walkthrough I was using at this point explicitly says to type, put locket in imprint, but it doesn't work at all. The game even responds by saying I do not even need to do this to complete the game. Well, it turns out I had to type put locket in slot, and the only reason I could figure that out was that at an earlier point in the game, I had to put keys in a slot before, so I did the same here, and it worked. One wouldn't think control is important in text adventures. I mean, it's just typing and reading text, but it matters as much as it does in any other genre game. It turned what would have been an average experience into one that tested my patience. What makes it strange is that this is a pretty late game in terms of text adventures. It came out in the late 80s, way later than other text adventures that had already solved these problems. The only explanation I could find is that it was possibly a limitation of the engine the game was created in, since the old review of this game mentions that in regards to other text parser issues. What has no explanation is why the theme song plays at random times. Anytime when playing, whether the player is typing or reading, the game will pause and play the Twilight Zone sting. Its only purpose to remind you that this is a Twilight Zone game. What starts out as a nice wink to the show becomes increasingly annoying as it frequently stops progress to hear that sting. After playing, I don't think I want to hear that tune for a long while. With all these issues, the Twilight Zone text adventure is not an enjoyable experience. But surprisingly, the ending recontextualizes the game in one of its few redeeming factors. Once the player enters the door unlocked from the final puzzle, they are greeted by a stadium of aliens. They are congratulated on passing the aliens' test, saving humanity from destruction and allowing the player to go home. They return home, but not before hearing the aliens laugh as they leave. Their home appears normal, but once the player tries to open the window, they realize they are in an alien zoo full of exhibits of other planets. The end. So, the arbitrary scenarios, the strict required actions, the bad controls, all culminating in a conclusion as hostile as the rest of the game. The player had no control in their situation, despite what they may have thought previously. The expectation is the ending will make those hard obstacles worth overcoming, that the player would be praised for enduring through all its flaws. I mean, that's what video games are supposed to do, right? Make you feel like a hero? Then after all that effort, pulls away any sense of accomplishment and humiliates the player for expecting a congratulations for finishing a video game. It's a harsh ending to a harsh game, and while it doesn't really transform the game into something worth playing for most, it subverts player expectations in a way that is delightfully reminiscent of the Twilight Zone. It's a bold and fitting end for the Twilight Zone text adventure, an adaptation which finally succeeds at translating its source material into a new medium at its very end. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon or Ko-fi. Patreon is if you want to support me monthly, and Ko-fi is for one-time support. These videos wouldn't be possible without the generous support of my patrons and Ko-fis. Any amount helps this channel keep going. Anyways, here's my Twitter, my Instagram, my channel link if you want to subscribe, and some other videos I've made. Well, that's all I had to say. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you around.